Good morning, Wabash. Today's speaker graduated from Wabash in 1968 as an English major and a psychology minor. While here, he was a brother at Sigma Chi and a member of the last senior council. After graduation, he spent a few years pursuing teaching interests, and then when he was Dean of Students at St. Lawrence University, he received a call from President Ford in 1997 asking if he would come back to Wabash and serve as Dean of Students, and he's been here since. So please help me in recognizing and welcoming Dean Bambrey for his chapel talk entitled Rules and the Gentleman's Rule.
Good morning again, Wabash. Thank you, Andrew, all the men of the Sphinx Club, for inviting me to speak and for continuing this fine tradition of chapel talks. These talks are important. They help us preserve our sense of community and shared moments. My topic today, at least what I told the Sphinx Club earlier this week, is rules and the gentleman's rule. I have to tell you, though, that the pressure got to me. Dean Bambrey. I can't do voices like President White does voices. But Dean Bambrey, we need a title for your chapel on Thursday. Okay, how about rules and the gentleman's rule? So, yesterday I saw an email announcing today's chapel, which included the promise of my take on the gentleman's rule. Gosh, I thought, I'd better include that. I have a take on the rule, and I'll give it to you, at least in part, this morning. It won't surprise any student. My entire thinking about the rule, though, has evolved over many years, and it's still evolving. And so it would take me more time than I have this morning to tell you all of what I think about it. But here goes part of it. Rules. Ed Hainish, who used to be a professor of chemistry here, used to slap his hand on the desk and say, "Moles, goddammit, gentlemen, moles." Well, rules, gentlemen, rules. I often hear Wabash folks, students and others, say the college only has one rule. This is, of course, however proud a statement, wrong. The college has many rules and many standards. We have rules about taking vehicles from the motor pool and rules about who can drive those vehicles. We have rules about using our facilities and rules about registering for classes. We have rules about when certain events can take place. Rules about parking. Rules about parking and handicap spaces. Rules about library books. Rules about painting the senior bench. Rules about this and about that and about some other thing. And we have the gentleman's rule, our most public pronouncement of our expectations for students, and specifically for student behavior. I want to make that behavior with a capital B. The gentleman's rule is so much a part of Wabash culture that I don't think very many of us ever wonder how it came about. How did it get here? Why is it the way it is? When did it originate? Well, let's start with this. It has not been a part of our thinking about the college's relationship with its students since 1832. It has not been part of it since the founding of the college, since the beginning. Certainly we recognize that the gentleman's rule sets Wabash apart. I know of no other college, no other university with anything resembling its concise ideal of expectations for student behavior. We say it fosters student responsibility, puts the burden squarely on you, and on you, and on you. We say the rule's beauty or strength is found in its ambiguity, so that all students must struggle with its meaning and interpret it, even as each new generation of men enters the college. Using language that those of you familiar with Coach Rob Johnson frequently hear, the gentleman's rule is a central reason we insist that Wabash is a college for men and not a school for boys. A college for men. But whence the gentleman's rule? Those founders who knelt in the snow to pray for the success of the college did not in the 1830s say, "Well, gentlemen, we need a rule to help our young men mature and take responsibility for themselves. We need that rule. So when we need to give them the old heave-ho, or make them wear a scarlet W as outward sign of their transgression, or just reprimand them, rap them on the knuckles, we have a rule." In fact, if not the rule we know today, something like the present-day gentleman's rule has existed here since our earliest days, even among other rules in that early period. College materials for the 1839-1840 academic year include the following directive. Every student is received as a gentleman and is expected to conduct himself with propriety, to be diligent in study, and to depict himself in an orderly, courteous, and moral manner, both in the college and the community. The essential elements are already there. The student is expected to conduct himself and to be a gentleman, both in the college and the community. Here are the first hints of the present-day rule. You remember the rule, right? The student is expected to conduct himself at all times, both on and off campus, as a gentleman and a responsible citizen. Well, there were lots of college student conduct rules in the early years and throughout the 19th century. Testimony both to the standards of the day and the ministerial founders and presidents of the college. And, of course, the faculty attachment to religious and moral principles. At the very beginning, there were no formal rules of discipline. Long before there was a dean of the college or a dean of students, the faculty operated under a general statement issued by the Board of Trustees in 1834. That statement authorized the officials of the college to have, quote, special regard to the moral and religious improvement of the students. The president and faculty were to exercise paternal government. Quote again, obstinate offenders shall be admonished privately or before the school or be dismissed. The very first case has gone down in college lore and is still celebrated today in the student publication Barrickman's Revenge. The case involved Basil Barrickman, who, according to the faculty minutes of the time, was to be, quote, expelled from this institution for the following reasons, to wit. First, faculty minutes, that he has repeatedly occasioned serious and unnecessary disturbances at the college building by boisterous and profane language. Second, also adding the glaring crime of threatening his fellow students with violence. Third, that when a member of the faculty conversed with him in a friendly manner in reference to his conduct, he abruptly withdrew from the institution. Fourth, that he refused to attend a meeting of the faculty, appointed expressly to afford him the opportunity to comply with conditions by which he might have retrieved his character. Resolved by the faculty that a copy of the above resolutions and reasons be put in the hands of Barrickman and a letter explaining the whole proceeding be sent to his mother. Early on, there were explicit prohibitions about the use of tobacco products and alcohol, and other activities. Here's a sample from the 1850s. The discipline of the institution is moral and parental. It seeks the greatest good of the greatest number. Hence, no man who indulges in card playing, dancing, intemperance, or other vice, or habitually neglects his studies will be allowed to remain. And here from somewhat later in the 19th century, this might be my favorite. The attention of students is called to the following important rule of the college. Any student guilty of immorality, drinking, gambling, or frequenting places where intoxicating liquors are sold, by his own act, severs his relation with the institution. And unless he leaves town within 48 hours, his name will be posted on the bulletin board. Wow. By his own act, severs his relation with the college. And that's just not expulsion. He's got to leave town, or else his name will be posted on the bulletin board. All I can guess is that must have been a very, very bad thing. Time passed. A lot of time passed. By the end of World War I, around 1919, the college catalog contained this statement. It is assumed that every student entering the college will conduct himself in a gentlemanly manner, both in the college and in the community, and that he have an earnest purpose and studious habits. Well, it sounds familiar. And several decades later, shortly after the end of the Second Great War of the last century, this time 1947, the gentleman's rule was in its language very close to the way we now know it. And just importantly, and this is important, just as importantly, it now has a context or a frame. It has an introduction. It's in the college catalog. And that introduction says, only one rule of conduct is prescribed at Wabash. And then the gentleman's rule is stated thusly. The student is expected to conduct himself at all times as a gentleman and responsible citizen. Missing from that 1947 version is only the phrase we now find embedded after "at all times," the phrase both on and off the campus, which you will recall echoes the language of the 19th century about behavior in the community. The phrase, both on and off the campus, was first printed in the college catalog of 1953-1954. No one I've talked to remembers how or why that brief additional phrase came about. And from 1953 then to the present, going on 55 years, the gentleman's rule has been as we learn it now. The student is expected to conduct himself at all times, both on and off the campus, as a gentleman and a responsible citizen. What we generally neglect or ignore is the context I mentioned earlier. That language, it's not part of the rule, but it's an introduction to it, a frame for it, and also an explanation of why the rule exists, read thusly by 1965 when I was a student. The rule and then the frame just above it. The frame said this in 1965. Wabash College believes that an important contribution of college experience to the student is the opportunity for him to develop self-reliance and personal responsibility. Therefore, only one rule of conduct is prescribed at Wabash. Wabash College believes that an important contribution of college experience to the student is the opportunity for him to develop self-reliance and personal responsibility. Later on, this context was modified slightly, so that by the year of the last fully printed Wabash College Academic Bulletin, which was 2004-2005, the rule of conduct, section called the rule of conduct, began with this introduction to the gentleman's rule. Perhaps the most striking aspect of student life at Wabash is personal freedom. Believing that students ought to develop self-reliance and personal responsibility, the college has long prescribed only one rule of conduct, and then the rule. So here's the crux of the matter. The gentleman's rule is framed within that context of A, it's a student rule. B, we know and we want and we believe that students ought to be given a lot of freedom. C, they also should be self-reliant. And D, it's their personal responsibility. It's a student conduct rule. While others on campus are expected to live by high standards of responsibility and ethical behavior, the gentleman's rule expects students to act as gentlemen and responsible citizens. That's a heavy burden to try to live up to that rule. The expectation of being able to balance freedom and responsibility while asking and assessing what it means to behave like a gentleman is a difficult, precarious, and almost impossible challenge. That challenge is for a student through his 4 years here to look at, to assess, first his own actions, and second, the actions of other students. It's not an honor code. It's a code of personal responsibility. The challenge is to hold out a gentlemanly standard and try one's best to live up to that standard. And to struggle with it, with all of it, from the definition of what it means to be a gentleman to the application of that definition in your behavior. All students, well, almost all, fail at this. As you must. As you must. For after all, you are human and young. So as we know, students break the gentleman's rule all the time. Mostly in small ways. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that's all right. But we all know it's going to happen. I'm concerned about the larger, the bigger, the more serious behaviors that threaten the rule. Violence, behavior fueled by alcohol, dishonesty, academic and otherwise, theft, things that happen here from time to time. All too often, if you ask me, all too often, because I'm an idealist about the rule. And these disturbances hurt our community, gentlemen. You, all of you sitting here this morning, you are the preservers of the gentleman's rule. Not me, not the president, not the board of trustees, the students. The students are the preservers of the gentleman's rule. You will decide if it maintains through your generation into the future, just as previous generations have decided. In a time and in a world when behavior of young men is scrutinized, when Wabash stands for, in the eyes of many, on campus and off, the example of how young men should mature, well, then immature, ungentlemanly actions hurt you and hurt your college, hurt my college, hurt our college. The worst thing any of us, but particularly students, can do is embarrass or threaten the welfare of the college. You can't allow that. You, all of you, you can't allow that. Nor can anyone who loves Wabash. You preserve the rule for future generations. It's your rule. It's your time. For me, I have a 40-plus year relationship with Wabash. For me, it's always been a love affair. I love Wabash College. I love the place. I love being here. I love its buildings. I love what happens here. Almost all of you do as well. And part of that love, gentlemen, part of that love, and a big part of it for me, and I know for you, comes out of our pride in the gentleman's rule. Thanks and good luck this year. Have a great 2007-2008.